stage and I've done great, I know it.
Right.
Just as I know when I've gone on my
And
ass.
roll 3.
Right. Exactly.
At one point where it said, if you're not going to come back here when I go on my ass, stay away during the victory dinner.
Right.
I don't need you when I've scored and I do so great. I need you when I've gone on my ass and you're never here.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. But they were there for you.
No, this group,
This group
all
was
of my
there for
family was always there. I'm talking about that entourage you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is that I think it's serious business. This whole process.
You got to remember
get-
what this business is, Carol. You have to remember it's make-believe. It's pretending, like my 3.5-year-old daughter is pretending to be. In the theater community, in the motion picture community, the very nature of what show business is you're being paid to deliver your body for a make-believe experience. Nothing is real other than your point of view, your self-worth, your integrity, and shooting from the hip. All of that is real. Now, a lot of people will not take the time to shoot from the hip because it brings with it a responsibility to go on after that. You see, if you hear somebody say, "You were very good tonight," if you have any integrity, you will say to them, "You have no taste. I was not very good tonight. I don't need you to tell me I was very good tonight, because I wasn't good tonight. But tomorrow, when I'm going to be wonderful, I'm not going to need you here at all. I know it at the time that it happens."
But that idea, it's like sending the fighter back into the ring. Do you know? I mean, it's that.
Mm-hmm.
The description of your experience of building that theater for that first ABC show, and how the people who really screw up are the guys from ABC because they've got their Union Electronics people and everything. It almost, the description of after that show, you could almost feel, reading it, how out of breath and exhausted you must have been at not being able to do anything about it. In other words, all of a sudden, it's not in your control at all. It's this goes out and that goes out, and
They made a deal that I was in control,
that's right.
and then they reneged.
Right. And the guy standing in the office who says, "Gee, do you think we're going to have a problem with one of those Mort Saul remarks?" I mean, here he is representing the people who completely screwed the show up. But he's going to put that little
Of course.
Nietzsche thing in, right? If you could talk
You deal
about
with them
that.
every day.
Well, I know, but you see, you came out of an environment. Hal Wallace, I'm sure he was a bastard in his own way.
He was a brilliant
brilliant
filmmaker.
guy, the Paramount people, but you walked into a group of people who all knew how to make movies. They weren't incompetents like the network people. These guys, they had their stuff together. They had been doing it a long time before you got there, right? And they made you an environment where you could grow. I mean, that's unheard of today. I mean, that's just not given to anybody, you know? And in that environment, especially that Paramount environment, you were able to make these wonderful things. Because you didn't have to worry about all these
Mhm.
other things, you know? There's a difference between learning every crew person's job and worrying about whether the guy even knows what he's doing. You know what I mean? That, and I wish you could talk a little bit about that, because I think it has I want to
Well, you see,
cover
when you
the television days.
All right, when you learn the other guy's job and you show interest in it and in him, he brings his level of excellence up a couple of notches because of it. You're doing him a great favor. One, you're not ignoring him. Two, You're making it clear to him how important he is on the shoot. 3, you're giving him respect because you love what he does, because you know how intricate the work is. So you're giving people behind the camera feelings of self-worth, which they never get. People don't even know their goddamn names. Hey, you! You can't do that to
And
people.
the roll at the end. Do you ever notice the guy who has like cut his hands with the magazines for months? It's gone like that.
Mhm.
You ever notice how fast the crew roll is?
Yeah.
Luke's worked on all of this, but you know it's true. And what happened was, once it got into the independent world, it became even more abusive. Once the studio system crumbled, then you had all like the Larry Cohens of the world, everybody non-union. Oh yeah, you could climb up there 10 stories high. It was no longer crew. It was really abuse. That's what you're saying about
Mhm.
all these guys that are going to be old.
Mm-hmm.
Because it just became, how much can we milk out of this? How much talent can we get and then keep most for ourselves? You know?
I had crews bust their ass for me. I could tell you stories about what I got back because I gave them love and respect. Incredible. They went above and beyond union rules. They killed themselves for me because they knew it was my project. And to watch them lay back when it was a Hal Wallace project, how their energy levels dropped 50% because he didn't even know anyone's name or had the dignity or courtesy to say good morning to any of my crew.
Could you, before I forget, could you tell me the story, if you want to?
Carol, can you just give me one?
Sure. No? I think that's real good. That would never go on today. I mean, the guy would like call his lawyer or
Mhm.
something. You know, I mean, it would never just be man to man.
No, but Frank Tashlin, he was going to go to his lawyer.
Right.
He wanted to get out of the contract with Hal Wallace.
But could you have in those days? I mean, in those days you didn't get out of things that you didn't want to get out, that the guy didn't want you out of, did you? Today?
No, it was very tough to get
Very
out of a
tough.
contract.
Right.
And Tashlin said, I'm going to get my lawyer to get me out of these next 3 pictures. I can't handle it. I can't take it with this guy. I said, I'll help you get out of the contract in an hour. He said, what are you talking about? I said, you just have to do the following. Tell him you looked at a rough cut. And at the time I think we were doing artists and models. I said, tell him after the rough cut tonight that he's butchered it and that he doesn't know how to cut. You will be out of your contract because I'm telling you to press the one button that he can't handle. He thought of himself as this great editor of the work. Now, he happened to have been a great editor in drama. Summer and Smoke, Sheba. He did some incredibly wonderful things like Casablanca. But when it came to comedy, he had a sense of humor like a menstrual period, okay? That's the only way I can describe his sense of humor and his inability to deal with it.
Well, he also kept his eye on the buck, right?
Yeah, but you're in the editing process. The buck didn't get in his way there.
But did he have that much to do with? He didn't really edit Martin and Lewis films, did he? Didn't he pretty much leave you alone with those?
Mm-mm.
No.
No. Warren Lowe was the editor, but he was told by Wallace what to cut. When Warren Lowe saw that the cut couldn't be made, Wallace would look at the material the next day, and Warren Lowe said, I made the cut you wanted, and he believed it. That's how bad a cutter he was in comedy. Tashlin was out of his contract the next day.
That's interesting. The story of him saying to Tashlin on the circus film, what do you need? You don't need 3 rings. 1 ring is enough.
Yeah,
You
for
make enough money on Martin and Lewis film. Shoot it from a few different angles. You don't need 3 rings.
Tashlin told him he was crazy.
Well, he How did you happen to sign with Hal Wallace? Of all the people who you could have signed with.
Because Hal Wallace came to see us at the Copa, and he had just come from Warner Brothers to Paramount, and he needed to bring Paramount 3 packages, 3 films. He had Barbara Stanwyck, Burt Lancaster, and Martin and Lewis under contract, which fused his deal with Paramount tremendously. That's how that happened. Paramount wanted Martin and Lewis. Hal Wallace wanted them, and he talked Paramount into letting the Hal Wallace banner hire Dean and I so he could deliver those 3 parcels.
So you and Dean signed with Hal Wallace before you signed with Paramount?
We never signed with Paramount. We signed with Paramount after the split. Then Dean and I made independent films for Paramount.
Oh, see, I misunderstood because I saw in one interview where you were saying everybody was after Dean and I at the Copa, and I turned away MGM and I turned
Yeah,
because I
I
had worked
wanted
at
Paramount. Well, Wallace
But-
was Paramount. He was releasing through Paramount, and we would be at Paramount because that's where he had his company.
So you met Wallace when? When did you first meet him?
In October of 1947
And he came to see you guys in
at the
club?
Copa.
At the Copa. And
In 48, we were consummating the deal, and we were shooting at the end of 48.
And did you decide to sign with him because you did your homework and saw the films that he made, or you liked him?
No, more because he had the Paramount connection.
And did Dean just let you make the decision?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Knowing people's names is something that you've always been able to do. When you would go into a club, and you were in the early nightclub days with Dean, you would be introduced to the band members, and you would know every guy's name. You just remember it.
Right. The way I learned a crew of 160 men by name.
Dean would not remember anybody's name. He'd call everybody Pally.
Pally, yeah. He called me Pally one day. I said, "It's Jerry." We had been together 5 years. He called me Pally.
Was that because he didn't care, or he just...
No. It had nothing to do with care. It was easy. It was just easier. If he didn't have to put his mind to work, he didn't.
He liked easy.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
He could take a nap 15 minutes before opening night at the London Palladium with Her Majesty the Queen in the audience.
And you were running around with the props. But think about it if 2 guys were both up running around with the props.
No. We always knew that the way we had it, I handled the business, I did the editing, I did the writing. It worked. He played golf. But it's very important to say for Dean that when he came from the golf course and I finished writing the material and we would put it on its feet, he knew it in 5 minutes, and he was impeccable. It could be take 1 because he had it so well.
But
But if he wanted to come and do what I did, if I wanted to play golf, we could have made the switch and it would have worked.
You really think so?
No.
I don't either. I heard a very great story from Bob Fermanek. I said to him, you know, all of the talk about Dean, it makes me kind of remember that when I used to go with all my friends to watch Martin and Lewis, that when Dean would sing, we would get up and go get popcorn. And he said, they did that test years later. 10 years later, they re-released the Martin and Lewis movies. They had kids in the audience, and when Dean started to sing, those kids got up. So it's a different audience. Your audiences, when you were a club act, were people who had money.
Mm-hmm.
They were the in crowd. You could be a lot more glamorous. He could be a lot more funny. I mean, it was different from the people who paid the 25 cents to.
Of course.
So it had to be very schizophrenic, right? That on the one hand, you've got to tell me the story of buying the tuxedos for the team, because numbers of people have told me that when you guys were a club act, that many people thought you were more glamorous than Dean, in the sense that you loved to be styled up, you would tap dance, and I mean it was not that movie character that you had to write
No.
in, right? So how did you handle that? Tell me about that. How did you enjoy it more when you could just stretch out and go out on the road with him and not have to I mean, you always talk about him being pigeonholed, but in a certain way, you were very restricted too by the movies. You had more to do, and of course you made you made those movies because that people came to see you. I mean, not to diminish him, but people came to see you.
What they
So-
didn't understand was they couldn't have seen me if he wasn't there.
Absolutely.
He was the spine of the whole act.
He absolutely was. He absolutely was.
But I did tell him the following. You can't take a pratfall in a gray suit. It doesn't work. He said, why? I said, because you can go down to the Bowery and see 50, 60 gray suits laying in the gutter. But when you take a fall on a dusty floor in a $3,000 tux, that's funny.
And who taught you that?
My father.
So you laid out the money, and you made
My
sure.
father taught me everything you've heard today. My father taught me everything you've seen me do in 64 years. I'm just still trying to get it right. He was the most brilliant performer that ever lived. He did the mime better than I do. He conducted better than I do. He was funnier than I ever was. He sang better than I ever sang. He danced better. His body rhythms, he had an austere kind of quality. The women absolutely went nuts when he would sing a love song, and in a heartbeat he'd have a stupid hat on doing crazy walks that I learned from him. I learned everything from my dad.
Yet, your father didn't really want you to go on the road at 16, and Irving K. did.
He was just afraid of what pain show business would hold for me if I didn't make it. You see, it's very much like he told me once, he said, we're living in New York, and do you notice the loneliness of it when we're not productive? It's the most exciting place to live when you are doing something productive. If you're not, the loneliness is borderline suicide. And only in New York.
You were sure right about that.
Yep.
Definitely right about that. He
was right about a lot of things.
mm,
He was right about when you walk out on the stage and that lady paid $70 to see you. You only have one responsibility, and that's to work your ass off. And if you're going to be the consummate professional, he said, sweat. I'll be embarrassed and offended if you ever walk off that stage dry. That means you dogged it, you didn't give 100%, and you're getting careless.
it's a lot to live up to. That puts a lot of stress on the person. Right?
He got me to where I am.
Yeah. How big a price was that for you? I mean, is that a big price to pay?
Let's put it this way. I once told somebody, most men in this world don't mind being the one of the 200 drummers in the parade. I do mind. I had to carry the baton. You want the baton? It carries a lot of responsibility.
Right. Do you want to talk at all about all of the things that you wanted to give your parents, and whether you feel now, okay, with he's, you know, eventually you get it right. Eventually you figure out, hopefully, that you can, you know what you need, at least a little bit more of what you need.
When did you see Walter?
I spoke to him. I'm not seeing him for a couple of weeks,
Oh.
but I
You're
made
in
it my
for a-
business to have conversations with people who were close to you. I wanted to just have short conversations with them. They gave me some interesting perspectives on it.
Walter's an incredible man.
Right.
Incredible man.
He sounded as though he was very incredible. So that's what I mean. It's the idea that when somebody sees you in a scene from one of your old films, and then you start talking about when you bought your father the car. That film was shot at that time, and you were. I'm interested in who you were then, what those emotions were then, not what you now know about that.
Well, the problem was that I was so full of myself then, driving so hard to reach those galaxies I dreamed about, that I was very vulnerable. So it was my dad's birthday, and I called General Motors. A.L. Roach was chairman of the board of General Motors. And I said, my dad's never driven a car in his life, and he's going to be 50 years old. I want to get him a patent tank so that if he gets into an accident, at least he's surrounded by better than what they're making today. Well, I paid $100,000 to have that four-door sedan made. And in 1957, 58, that's a lot of money. They built it for me. FOB Detroit delivered to me in Los Angeles. I put red ribbons around. I drove it to his house. I went up to the door, rang the bell. I said, "Happy birthday, Dad, look." And he said, "It's not a convertible." So I was shattered for a moment or two. Then I went on to explain the reason that it's a four-door sedan is that you got much more protection. It was built to protect you and Mom. But I never forgot that he said that. He just wasn't thinking, that's all.
Mm. And
He
you
didn't
wanted
mean
him
to
to be
he didn't mean to hurt me.
And you wanted him to be protected because you didn't want to lose him.
Of
You
course
wanted him
not.
safe.
Of course not.
He was very important to you.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the key people in your life. So when you think about it psychologically, to make this supercar just to ensure his safety, that's a lot.
You know what happens if we talk about my daughter. The passion is so intense that I can't get half of the words out. Well, that's how he felt about me and how I felt about him.
Right.
The love, when it's right, that a father has for the child. Only God can explain to us the dimension of that love. And I knew that I had that from him. And I also knew he had it for me.
And you had it from your children also.
Hmm?
You had it from your children also.
Oh, yeah.
You made sure that you did that. It's striking reading old magazine articles and things about you where Gary is saying the most wonderful father in the world, the greatest, most loving. I mean, these tremendous adjectives that your children describe you in.
Makes you very proud.
You work very hard for those.
Well, they don't just come. You have to work out.
That's right. But they came to your father from you, and I guess intellectually you must have known that he was working at it, but they weren't really there for you in the way you were there for your kids.
But he
They
did.
couldn't be.
He was very clear about when I was quitting school. He was very clear about if you're not going to complete your high school education, and of course not be able to go on to college. He said there's a Band-Aid that can be put on this decision you're making. And that Band-Aid is go out in the world and ask everybody anything you want to know. The education you'll get if you can submit to everyone you meet. You need information from them about what they do. You'll become articulate, in some cases prolific. You'll be bright. You'll get an education better than anything they'd ever give you at Dartmouth, if you'll do that. And he said, I need you to attempt that, because without a formal education, you will get shot down at some time and not be able to recover.
With your tremendous IQ and your tremendous curiosity to know about everything, learn about everything, did you ever think that you would want to stop for a couple of years and just immerse yourself and read? And I mean, think of what you could have become. You could have probably become anything you wanted to be with your. Did you ever think of doing that?
No.
Oh, God.
No, because I'd be missing today's information and tomorrow's information.
Right. Okay, just a couple more things, and then we'll be ready to break. I just want to talk a little bit about a lot of the stuff with Dean is going to be for the afternoon stuff. I wanted to ask you, I saw you describe the last night at the Copa. Everybody loves to describe the last night at the Copa. I've seen you talk about
Mhm.
it. And you talk about, getting off the stage and going up, and you even talk about calling him up. But when you write about it, you write about it in the most devastating way. Have you never talked about it the way you write about it because you can't get through it?
Probably.
Because when I was stopping the tape of the telethon, when he comes on the telethon, and I thought you were very gracious in one interview when you said that anybody could see the love we had, but I see you just, the face is like struggling not to cry. And I see him, but I don't see him in that way.
He was the same way.
He seems...
He just has a better facade.
Is that what it is?
Uh-huh. He's a mush inside, but I'm the only one he ever let know about it.
Right. And in a way, in a big way, he's much more somebody who can't deal with emotions and people and you. He has to stay
That's why
off.
he's a recluse.
Right.
He doesn't have to deal with that.
Right.
The minute he opens the door to his home, it'll bring in all of the factions that will annoy him.
I think it's more than annoying. I think it's stressful. You look like the stressed kid, but I think that emotional...
Now I need a new tape.
Okay. I think emotional...